Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're working our way through the book of 1 Kings. We started it last time, so we're very, very early on into it. Got a little peek of Solomon starting to take over from David and a little bit of co-regency there before he takes over the whole thing. Ended on a really famous story last time.
We did?
Yeah.
I already forgot.
Yeah.
But there's drama, right? And there's always drama. And David's second son tried to become the first king. And we saw Solomon overcoming last week. And there was all these obstacles that he really had to overcome to actually become the king. And then David left Solomon some last requests.
Yeah.
And then David dies.
Yeah.
And to put it nicely, Solomon secured the kingdom.
Secured the kingdom.
Oh, yeah. To put it a little less nice, he killed everybody. That was against him. Not everybody, but people who were against him. He took them out. He took out the opposition.
Yeah, and David let them live, but then at the same time said, I'm going to be gone. You know what needs to be done.
Yeah, don't wait too long.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He did say that.
Yeah,
don't wait too long.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said it last time. I'll say it again this time. It still reminds me of The Godfather. When you but it's a dynasty. Even in The Godfather, it's a dynasty change, right? It's or not a dynasty, but a dynasty leader change, and you have to make sure that the people around you know you're in charge. And whether it's right or wrong, this is how things worked back then. It's how things still work today, with a lot of governmental changes, especially in this part of the world.
Right. Right. So we ended last week with God asking Solomon, tell me what I should give you.
Yep.
And Solomon asked for judicial discernment, so wisdom, as it led to judicial matters.
Yeah.
Trials.
Making wise decisions for leading
from a law
Israel.
standpoint.
Right.
Yep. And God was very happy with the request that Solomon gave, and he gave him so much more. Yeah. And then we also had the story you were talking about with the famous story.
Yeah, the famous story with the baby and
baby and two prostitutes.
Right.
All right. So this week, Solomon goes on a building spree. Woo! Yeah, exactly. So this isn't a snap judgment. It started with David. And in fact, David had the plans for the temple. David said, hey, God, I'm going to build you a house. And God says, no, we're going to switch that around. Right. But I will allow you to build me a temple, but here's what it needs to look like.
Yeah.
And gave him the specifications. So David started the funding of it. And he was told, you are not going to build it, but your son will. So Solomon's at the point now where we're close.
Yeah.
Right? Where we've got the plans, got the money. We need to get some stuff before we actually start working.
Yeah.
And the magnitude of the stuff he needs is really staggering.
Yeah.
There.
Chapter 4 starts with his cabinet, and we've talked about this in the past with David. They had their key people or whatever. Right. Before we get into chapter 5 and the building itself, chapter 4 really gives an interesting nutshell sort of snapshot
how their government worked
of Solomon and his who he was and what he did and everything.
So he had it looks like he broke the nation into 12 districts, surprise. And he appointed a governor through each one, and one of the governor's job was to supply everything to the capital once a month.
Yeah.
Or for a month.
Yeah, for a month.
Yeah. So I get January, you get February,
Yep.
Go around the circle, everybody else goes. I think you had a really neat thing that you pointed out. I'll let you say it.
Tom Constable in his commentary points out that Judah was exempt from that.
Yeah.
For some reason Judah was not let's just use the word taxed.
Right.
Because that's what the governors of these regions would do. It was a tax on their people. They had to work hard to supply Solomon and his crew, his cabinet, his court. But Judah didn't. And Constable, free commentary, fantastic. You can find it on netbible.org. Netbible.org has Constable's commentary there. He makes it's a speculation, but he makes the speculation that when Solomon died and his son Rehoboam takes over in chapter 12, and he says, should I tax you hard? Should I? And his advisors say, hey, go easy on him, but then his young advisors say, do it even harder, right?
Right.
The people are saying, your father taxed us really hard. He made us work really hard to supply his thing. This is it comes back here, and Judah didn't have to, which was Solomon's tribe, and so there was already this division even though it wasn't a divided kingdom, there was a division within the kingdom of Judah and the rest, and Judah got special treatment.
Yeah, and I think a little thing like that, I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
It is very huge.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of neat. They gave the names of the governors, and one was Ben-Hur. You know, ooh, Charlton Heston. You know, but then you start looking, and way too many of these guys are named Ben.
Ben, yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on? What's going on here?
Ben is just a really famous first. No, actually, Ben is the Hebrew word for son. So each one of these. So Ben-Hur is son of Hur. Yeah. So Solomon, they didn't have surnames necessarily. So Solomon's name, if he were like signing his name, Solomon ben David.
Yeah, son of David.
Son of David.
Yeah.
So that's how they kept the genealogies. So they were all named Ben. You know, but that's what it. But having Ben-Hur in the list,
and then also realizing he's one of these guys that is governor over a section, and they need to have a surplus so that they can feed a whole government for a month.
And there was a lot. You look at how much they ate.
Yeah, but this is the glory years of Israel.
Absolutely.
There was plenty to eat. There was plenty to drink. They were not constantly at war. They were making treaties, all that. But as you're reading, make sure to look to see how much the royal court consumed on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then you got to multiply it by 30. That's a big tax.
Yeah. About 7.2 million pounds or 3,600 tons of wheat annually, maybe. And that doesn't include the meat. That's just the wheat, or something.
Right. So big numbers. I mean, big tax, and you can see how even excluding one family or one tribe, Judah, one tribe, would be very disheartening.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting though is that his rule. Now, this is interesting. And this gets discussed a lot. It says that he ruled from the Euphrates River over, isn't that the land that God promised Abraham? Doesn't that get fulfilled here? Well, sort of.
The Abrahamic covenant?
The Abrahamic covenant, in Genesis 15, right? Well, sort of yes and no, because yes, those were still other nations that he was taxing, and, they were paying tribute and everything, but they were not actually Israel. Right, he didn't own all that land. He didn't. That wasn't all Israel. Israel was still here, and they had subjugated those other nations. Okay. So no, it isn't a fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant, but it's a taste of what it was supposed to look like, and with the Messianic king. And he was a foreshadowing of Messiah the King. Right. He obviously blew it, but this is what it could look like, and this is a sample of what it will look like in the millennium. Right. Actually.
Right. And still kings from the outside bringing in their produce, it seems, or bringing in their wares. So at the end of this chapter, we get some stats on the productivity of Solomon. And showing his wisdom. So he composed 3,000 proverbs, 1,005 songs, produced many manuals, and they kind of list those botany and
biology and insects and everything. He
cool.
He wrote the book on these things.
You got to start someplace, right? And what was really cool to me is people from all nations came to hear him, and that seemed to be the start of the come and see.
Yeah.
And I know you talk about it a lot, but the idea is with the temple, with God, as we'll see in upcoming weeks, God being in the temple, Israel wanted to be so different from other nations that people would come in and say, why are you different? And they would be able to see, and there were, here's why it is.
Yeah.
And, other nations would come to God because of it.
Yeah. And we'll find out in a later chapter that he had this navy and copper mines and gold mines and stuff, and the navy went all over the world, so it was supposed to be a come and see, but he was also
all over the place,
exploring the world.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. So chapter 5 is all about Solomon getting the building supplies for the temple.
Yeah.
So we see him communicating with known leaders of other countries, and the king of Tyre actually acknowledges Solomon and really congratulates him on being the king of Israel.
Yep.
And part of it is, hey, I worked with your dad.
Yeah.
Loved him. We had a great relationship. Look forward to working with you.
Yeah, which you like to have that kind of
Yeah,
relationship
exactly.
with established people.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So Solomon, I think, very diplomatically asks him for help, and he understands this is not going to be free. This is trade.
Yeah.
We're going to pay for it. And he says, I will pay whatever you say because we know your people cut down the best trees,
Yeah.
or know how to cut down the trees the best.
Well, so it still exists today. The concept of the cedars of Lebanon.
Yep.
Right, and that's what he did. He bought this wood, and that's what they chopped down the trees. They tied them all together, and they sent them down the coast
on a raft
on
It
the
was
Mediterranean.
awesome.
See, yeah. Because we're talking Lebanon, we're talking Tyre up north, modern day Lebanon.
Yep.
So just north of Israel. And, but he had to send them down to why do it over the land and the mountainous terrain and everything when you can just float them
Use
down the
water.
coastline.
Yeah. I like the way you said, this still exists today. And with these treaties, it still exists today too. We see when the U.S. has a presidential election, nations from all around the world are calling in saying congratulations, but it's also we acknowledge that this was a fair election and that this is the recognized new president of the United States.
Yep.
And frankly, the president of the United States does that
that
too
for
on
other-
other elections, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And that's strategic for them.
Yeah. Yep.
To make that call.
Yep, it happens all over the world today. The congratulations between the government officials and everything. Yeah. By the way, Tyre, Hiram here was the king of Tyre. Tyre is really interesting. We don't have time to get into all the geography, but Tyre is really interesting because as a city, it juts out into the Mediterranean Sea. It's sort of a fortress in itself. You have to attack its seaside. You can't attack it by land.
Nice.
And so this is the ancient Phoenician people that were expert water. They were sailors and they were good on the water. And even during this time, they used the water to their benefit when helping out here. So there's connections with long before Solomon and David.
Right. Make sure to check out the size of this operation. Israel is providing 30,000 men to help with the trees, and 70,000 common laborers, 80,000 stone cutters. Think of the bills for all these people.
Yep.
Unbelievable. All right, so then we get into chapter 6, and the assumption here is now we have the resources to actually start, right? We got the cedars coming in, we have stone coming in, we can actually start our building.
Yep.
And we see chapter 6 lists some starting dates. And we will see at the end of this chapter 6 that the building took 7 years to complete.
Yeah. But it says in the 480th year after the Israelites left Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign. That is very precise.
Right.
Right.
And it's also a great number to have.
Yeah, it's a great number because it helps us. Because we know historically we know Solomon's reign. There's no question.
Yeah.
Okay, that's world records, and we can get that. So to be able to go to the 4th year of his reign, and there's a little bit of is it the beginning of the year?
Yeah.
The
So
end
when
of the year?
when he was with David.
Yeah, but to be able to go 480 years back, that fits with what God told Abraham. Your descendants are going to be 400 years in a foreign land. That helps us date Abraham. It helps us date the Exodus. It helps us date the Judges. The book of Judges is notoriously difficult to date. We get a little bit in there in the book of Judges, but there are judges that, when this one's ruling and that one's ruling and they're overlapping and it's really, really hard. This one verse unlocks, in a sense, and I don't want to, like mysterious, but it unlocks a lot of that timeline stuff that would be really hard if it weren't for that.
Right. In this chapter, we also get the size for the temple.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, in our world today and all the building we're doing today, this is not an impressive size.
No.
But this is huge.
Yeah.
For back in the day. So 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, 45 feet tall.
So that's a hard thing for people to visualize. Right. So for those who are familiar with our church building here in South Bend, let me give you the visual here. 90 feet is from our double doors, and we're in the building here, so I'm going to point even though you can't see. From our double doors in the lobby, the main lobby, to the opposite wall in the auditorium where the exit door is behind the sound booth. That is 90 feet.
Yeah.
And then from the sound booth, the back wall of the sound booth, to the front of the platform is 30 feet.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So, I mean, obviously,
Right,
we're much shorter than 45 feet tall. But basically, Solomon's temple could fit in our lobby and auditorium on the main floor.
Right.
That's not big at all.
Right.
I mean, literally, our church building is much
Right.
bigger than. Now there are porches around it. There's other
Yeah, to make it bigger and
but
places
the
to be.
actual temple building itself would fit within our lobby and auditorium and not fill them up.
Right. And then I go back to 80,000 people to cut the stone for that. Wow.
Well, and Solomon did a thing where he would not allow the sound of cutting utensils, hammers and picks and stuff, within the temple area. They had to cut it elsewhere and then bring it in.
Bring the finished product in.
Completely finished, yeah.
Yeah, so you wonder, do they assemble it on site and number them? Well, the other choice is each one has to be the exact same, so you can count on them. And both are hard to do.
Right. Yeah. So this was not a like you said, a spur of the moment. This was not fly by night. It took a long time of planning, and it took 7 years to build this thing,
right,
which fits in our lobby and auditorium. You know. So
Right.
it's pretty impressive.
It is. And then once the structure was built, an unbelievable amount of money was put into the decorations,
Yes.
right? Just conceptually, when you're reading this, just take a minute to think about it. So the inner sanctuary, which was 30 by 30 by 30, was plated with gold.
So that would be
A lot.
Yeah, that would be a lot. So the inner sanctuary would be your holy of holies. That would be where the Ark of the Covenant
Would have been
was
in.
going to.
So that would have been on the inside
Yep.
of that, right?
Yep.
And then, like you said, outer courtyard, altar for sacrifices. I don't know. I think from a time standpoint, there's a lot of information about the inner room and where the ark actually is.
Yeah.
Maybe we just move on. But
Yeah, but the point is, it's all done in cedar, which
Right.
not only is that it's good for building, but for moths, and if you know anything about cedar, it's it's very, very
it's not going to rot.
right. But the decoration, the palm trees and the pomegranates and the cherubim and all this stuff is just amazing, and the detail, because this doesn't exist anymore. Right. So this is the stuff that Nebuchadnezzar tore down. Solomon's temple's dead, or gone, right? And then the second temple, Zerubbabel and Ezra, they rebuilt this temple, which didn't look anything like
But
this.
on the same foundation.
Yep. And Herod remodeled it for nearly 50 years during Jesus' time and everything, right? So this is all we have.
Yeah. Well, and then that temple was
destroyed in
by
AD
Rome.
70, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
the year 70,
Yeah.
so it doesn't exist at all, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there will be a temple again in the tribulation, but
Right,
all
so-
we have is a couple of chapters here and our imagination.
Yeah. So I asked him, I said, should we show a picture of what the temple looked like? And he's like, well, we actually don't have the blueprints.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's just
It'd be
it's all
difficult to-
speculation. But olive wood and the carved cherubim and flowers in bloom, and it's all gold plated, and your imagination can go wide. Just if everything's gold plated and then you put the lampstand in the middle of it,
Right, just the flickering.
just
and
gonna shine. I mean, it has to, like, if you could see it from space, I wonder,
Chapter 7, Solomon also builds a palace, right? So he needs a palace really to do work. And to me, this seems it's more of a judicial palace than sleeping quarters.
Yeah, I would imagine the harem, the houses, and everything. It says there were other buildings probably around it. I would guess that this is what's called the palace here is probably like it's called the Hall of Judgment, and his throne was there and everything. But his bedroom wasn't in the back or in the loft or whatever.
Yeah. So then we jump back to the temple.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for the remainder of our reading for this week, they point out a number of things in there, and there's some huge detail. Personally, I love the sea.
Yes.
In there, I don't know why. I always pick that out. It's basically half of a swimming pool.
Yeah.
I think they say 12,000 gallons, bronze.
Yeah.
Nobody's swimming in it, but if you think about it, everybody's going to be at the temple every day. they have to have water source,
Yep.
and they're actually going to be using a lot of water too. I mean, there is the altar is nearby. They're going to need to be washing some things,
Yep.
and keeping clean. Definitely, the priests have to wash
Yep.
up. I would assume they would give some of this water to the people at various times.
So I
I'm not
think
sure
it
about
went
that,
out to
but-
smaller basins.
Yeah,
I think
basins,
it went
yeah.
out to
But
smaller
but this would have been
basins.
the
This is
main-
the big one, right?
yeah.
So here's what I like about this. Because the dimensions are given. It's
Yep.
15 feet in diameter.
Yep.
And it's 45 feet in circumference.
Yep.
Which is pi.
Yeah, right.
3.14, right? I mean,
Right.
3 to 1. You know,
Yeah.
it's basically pi. And so this is one of the things I like, because no, the Bible is not a math textbook. But when it talks about math,
Yeah, they already knew.
it gets it right. You know, it's
Yep.
you know, it doesn't say, well, and you know, you figured out, you know, 3.1415. You know, he said it's 15 and 45, and everybody looks at that and says, well, yeah, that's a circle.
Yeah, it
You
is.
know?
It's half a circle.
And it is. I mean, it is. Yeah, it's not a sphere, you know, but it
Right.
is a circle around. You
Right.
know, and it's a perfect circle. So was it 15 and 45, or was it 15 and 45 dot? You know,
Yeah.
whatever. I love that.
Yeah. This thing was big enough. They said it was 4 fingers thick.
Yeah,
Thick.
yeah. The wall.
When you
well,
can almost stand and walk around the top.
Well, if you're going to hold 12,000 gallons, the thing had better be thick.
Yeah.
You know, so it doesn't. And it's sitting on top of bowls and
Yep.
and
And it said it's 7.5 feet high. I picture the holding area to be 7.5 feet high with the bowls underneath it, so which would even
Probably.
be taller.
Right.
So there has to be a way to dip things out
Yeah.
and to fill it back up.
So
And
what's
I'm sure they
interesting-
they had all that figured out.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that in this was much larger than the basin that was in the tabernacle that Moses had built back in Exodus. But the altar was not allowed to have steps up to it under what God told Moses, because it would have been immodest for priests wearing robes to walk up the steps, you know, so somebody could look up their robe.
Right.
But this had a way to get up, but it wasn't the altar, right? It was
Right.
off to the side where they were going to bathe or clean, you know, whatever. So
Yeah.
just really interesting details when you compare this to Exodus.
Yeah, and to me, I'm always like, okay, how do they get the water in, and how do they get the water out, and why do they need this big of a thing? But I think they're supplying water to a
Yep.
number of places, and
Yep.
this is the main, like Water Central.
Yep. It talks about movable stands. I mean, these are like ladders on wheels, you know,
Yeah.
and just really, really cool.
But probably gold plated. It doesn't say that.
Or, you know, bronze.
Yeah, bronze. Right? Yeah, so it takes 5 people to move it. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of our reading this week. I think it goes a lot. So we went with, hey, we have some plans to build a temple, and now we have the temple being built.
Yep.
So yeah, great place to stop.
Yeah. So a lot of detail in here, and of course we're having fun with some of it, but read through it. So don't rush through it. It's like, oh, this is I've got genealogies and I've got dimensions, right? No, take your time, read through it, because this is really interesting stuff. And if you're a math person, then you'll love it anyway. And if you're not a maths person, then read it anyway, because
Big numbers.
this is inspired. God decided to record this on purpose.
Right.
He wants us to know this. He wants to know that there is a plan. This was not just something thrown together.
Right.
And the place to worship God. And they did for hundreds of years in this location. So, all right. So if you have any questions or comments, just about knocked my tablet out there. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them our way. Otherwise, share this with your friends, subscribe, and we will pick up here next time.